part of my persona is a woman from Russia, northern Russia. So there was a lot of trade between the northern peoples in Sweden, Finland, all of our Viking friends. Remember, Viking is just a term for an occupation, not a people. But there was a lot of trade through all of that between the Middle East, what we consider the Middle East now, and where we have, China, etc., all the way up through Norway and Sweden and Finland, and into the British Isles. So we see a lot of trade throughout all of those. And since it seems to be that Northern personas have become very, very popular, how do you make your outfit look even better is you accessorize. Now, one caveat I'm going to say is that in the SCA, we have a fun, creative part of over-accessorizing. Most of the time when you see ladies and gentlemen with these big, huge beads and huge strands of all of these beads, not quite right, at least from the grave find evidence. Usually in the grave finds, you find 2 to 3 beads, maybe up to 5. If somebody was really, really important, it might have been possibly a strand, because remember, the things they strung them with kind of disintegrate and all the beads fall in through the cavities of the body and kind of get mixed up within the grave finds. So and museums are also notorious for, hey, all of these beads were found in these multiple different graves. We're going to put them all together as a find. Yeah, not fun. So just remember that the way we do it in the SCA with all of the bling, not quite as period as it was, but that's okay. We want to be able to have fun, be creative, and look the part. We want to show off our wealth, because remember, we're all supposed to be nobility, lowercase n. Unless you have a shiny hat, then it's capital case N, right? And we want to show off our wealth as wealthy folks within the Middle Ages and the medieval period. So those are things to be aware of, but I'm going to show off how you can go look for the right style, shapes, materials, and a lot of these are all available at your local Michael's. You can also go hit like antique shops and thrift stores and find things to take apart and put back together again. You can do this on a budget very, very easily to get a couple of like necklaces or a strand to put between your brooches, or just to wear a nice necklace for men and for women. So this is just an overview. So I'm going to share my handout. Give me just a second to let's see. Which screen are you guys seeing right now?
Period beads of the North.
Okay, so let me and display settings. Now is that full screen for you guys?
Yes, we have a picture of you off in the corner, but it is the primary full screen that is featured.
Sweet. Okay, so here is my fancy dancy slides. Your handout's going to follow this, but I put this into slide format to kind of talk about it a little bit simply and get a little bit bigger picture than what you see in the handout. So types of beads. Throughout the Middle Ages and even up through, I kind of stopped history personally at 1250 when we had the Huns come through. But honestly, this kind of goes for all time periods. You had glass, you had solids, transparents, and mosaic. Solids means you can't see through it. Transparent means you can see through it kind of. And mosaic are, I'm not a fan of mosaic beads, but a lot of people love them. They are kind of crazy looking. In the picture on here, don't quite have one on that photo. But if you see here, focus, yep. You can see this is all types of crazy things together. They're all individual pieces of glass that are together. There's some fancy patterns with mosaics. They were very, very popular. They're popular again for like modern jewelry. Not a fan. I do have a few. but lots and lots of glass. Then we get bone. Bone is very popular. Bone's very easy because you're eating animals. Animals have bone for waste. You can get lots of cool beads out of lots of various pieces of bones. We also have clay and what they call faience. A faience bead is a clay bead that kind of has a glass-ish outer layer, very popular in the Middle East and Egypt. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between clay beads and faience beads from period because once they've been in the ground for a long time, that faience layer can degrade a lot. But then we also have semi-precious stones. So we've got jet, quartz, amber, lapis. Think of a semi-precious stone or how we consider a semi-precious stone now, and they had it. That includes rubies, sapphires, and those kinds of things, much more rare because they came out of India and those types of places, but they still made it through the trade routes here and there. And then you also have metallic beads, so brass, bronze, gold. Again, rare, but still happened. And I show a picture of a gold bead there on the slide. And then we've got silver and granulated silver. And when I say granulated silver, you might see, these are a very specific style that have been found in Birka and other locations. And a good modern representation now is Balinese beads, but it's basically beads that have little bumps on them. So they're granules of silver that have been soldered onto the bead itself. There's many different ways to do it. That granulation is common in a lot of other silver work, but they did have beads of it. But again, super expensive because while we think in period now silver is very cheap, you know, it's the replacement for white gold. In period, it was actually more expensive than gold because it was only coming out of one specific area at the time. And once that dried up, then other metals came into play. But again, lots of different types of beads. Again, if you go look at this, we know that there's lots of plastics nowadays that look just like glass. There's lots of plastic nowadays that look just like some of our semi-precious stones. So if you can't afford the actual real thing, there's ways to get around that, and that's okay. Again, we're being creative here. We're trying to go find out what looks right. May not be the same weight as the medieval piece, but it's going to have the right look. Okay, so that's the types of beads that we have. Any questions on that? Okay. So shapes of beads and decorations. So familiar period shapes. We have round, that's pretty obvious, right? You have bicone, and bicone, there's a picture there and it's kind of a 3D looking rendered piece. You can see it's like two cones smushed together. So you took two styrofoam cups and put them together, that's a bicone, or two solo cups together, that's a bicone. Surprisingly annoying to make. Barrel beads, which is just basically a barrel. You've got one that is, let's see, you've got a barrel bead right here coming through next to this nice round bead right here. There are faceted beads. In this picture, I don't have a faceted, but usually you'll see that in semi-precious stones. There we go. So a faceted quartz looks like this. It's got all the different sides, so it kind of looks like a dice, but not quite. But faceted beads, because you know, it's much easier to facet something than it is to make it round when you're talking semi-precious, because you just put it on a sanding plate and grind it as it's, you know, as it's spinning or as just going. Like garnets are really easy to just grind down. We've got discs. Those are kind of fun. So basically just a flat disc Modernly, we do a lot of those now with pretty colors, and you wear them as like the central part pendant of a necklace. But they did have discs. They really weren't probably as large as what we see now. Because again, a lot of these were not as big as we see modernly. Because again, materials in period were expensive. The labor was cheap or not even charged for, especially in the early periods as we're talking here. So the materials had to travel long ways and get to the places to be made, even with the glass. Even though we do have glass bead making sites that we have found, it's still a lot of materials that have to get to those locations. Now we come on to my favorite beads of all time. These are grooved and melon beads. So imagine you've got a pumpkin style looking bead. There's actually two right here. These discs with like, it looks like they're kind of fuzzy looking. That's actually vertical striations on the beads, and they're lots of fun. I have an example here of a pumpkin colored pumpkin bead. So there's that side view that we see from the picture. And then you can see how deep those grooves are in the piece. They're my absolute favorite to make. I love them so much. They're lots of fun, and you can still find them. They have those in your stores. Go take a look. So those are kind of the shapes that we see. Stacked dots. Stacked dots are hard. I have a hard time as a bead maker making them, but they can either be dots within dots within dots, or they can actually be physically on top of each other. So you actually get, let's see, there we go. So you actually get protrusions of all these little dots. And that's a lot of control with your glass and your temperature to make it so it's not just a mess. Those are not my beads. Those are from Master Sarik out of North Shield. I don't do stacked dots well. But they're fun and I like them. I buy a lot of them because I think they're great and I'm not good at making them. So decorations, stripes and squiggles. This Charlie Brown looking bead right here. So you got stripes and squiggles on the same thing. Got some really cool X-shaped stripes here. And what's really cool is you can see it. There's like a white line in the middle and there's red on the outside. That was made by putting red glass down first and then putting white glass on top and melting it in. So lots of hard techniques. Another thing to point out to everybody, you see how all of these really aren't perfect? They're not. Medieval and period beads really just aren't always perfect. We in modernly like to see everything perfect, perfect, perfect. It doesn't have to be. It was difficult with the tools that they were using, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. That, you know, you can see this bead is kind of a little bit of wonky, but that's okay. It still makes a beautiful strand of beads. So don't worry about that. So we got X patterns. That was kind of the one I talked about down here. Still stripes, but it's in an X. Twisted cane. Let's see, it's kind of hard to see in this picture right here, but there is, what you can do with a piece of cane is you can take two colors and make a twist like a candy cane. When you apply that, it then gets, I'm looking to see if I've got one handy. It is a more advanced technique. Aha, here we go. So here is one of actually my beads with a piece of twisted cane. You can see the black and white stripe right there, and it's just applied all around the bead. Some of them you see that it's still exterior. Sometimes you see it's melted in, and it goes from there. Again, we see a lot of these now modernly, which is great. Mosaics that we talked about. Millifluori, it's kind of like mosaic, but basically a millifluori is you take a whole bunch of thin strands of glass and you stack them together and melt them together to make a object. Millifluori means million flowers. And so you can then cut those pieces of glass into tiny little shards that are all the same looking material as you go through, and then lay them directly on. That's what you see here. It looks kind of like an eyeball, but it's got, looks like white and red and then a green middle, and that's a millifluori. You find those nowadays Got a couple of examples. You get them actually out of Italy. They still make a lot of the Millifluori and cane that you can get, but that's actually two stacked. There's one on top of each other in this bead as it goes through, which is kind of fun, and then covered in clear glass. Modern, but lots of fun, and it goes on my really pretty strand that I made. Dots, 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 and more dots. Dots are very, very common. Again, a difficult technique, but lots and lots of fun. You see them throughout a lot of things. The next one's also an all-time favorite, and these are evil eye beads, meaning it keeps the evil away from you. You can kind of see here, it looks like the CBS, the old CBS logo, perfectly period. And we still get these coming out of Turkey in the Middle East. You get beads like that. You get things to hang up in your car to help ward off bad things when you're driving. You know, they're really fun to make. They're really cool to see. And even the earlier period style, you can still get with just, it looks like stacked dots, but they are kind of eyes. So they're just lots of fun. And then you get raked lines. So you put down some glass and then you pull a rake, an actual just a piece of metal through it, and it pulls the glass, because glass is liquid when you're playing with it. And you're just swirling it around. Lots and lots of fun. And then the last one, and you're going to go, this sounds like completely modern, it looks completely modern, is a foil wrap. So you would take your hot bead and you'd roll it through sheet of silver or gold. And that's what you're kind of seeing here. It's this stripe here is actually foil. And you'll see those modernly. They usually have a layer of clear glass on top of them to make them shine a little bit more. That wasn't really done in period because perfectly clear glass was extremely hard to get, because any impurities that come into the materials for the glass make it colored. So they would roll it in the thin sheets of metal that would adhere to the hot glass. It would cool and it would be there and be shiny. It wouldn't be a perfect circle. As you can see, there's imperfections in this even, but the foil wrap beads you find modernly, they had them in period. So more things to go look and find. So if you've walked down your craft aisle, you have seen all of these shapes. You've probably seen all of these decorations too. So you can put things together and make a really pretty object. Any questions on shapes and decorations? Okay.
None in chat.
Okay. Checking time. All righty. So colors. As I talked about, especially in glass, and this is specifically to glass because we already know what semi-precious stones colors come in at. It's by the minerals that are inside of those that make those colors. Well, the same thing happens with glass. We've got compounds that were added to the silica, and sometimes depending on where they pulled their materials, it would naturally occur that the glass would turn certain colors. They wouldn't always know exactly why, not until later in period. And Italy really became very famous for that. We still have merino glasses that are hugely expensive and out of this world beautiful. But earlier in period, they would know that if they dug out minerals and dug out dirt and things from various locations, melted it together with sand, they would get specific colors. So if you got red glass, and this is why even now modernly, if they go to repair a stained glass window, red glass, especially red transparent glass, is the most expensive because it's gold chloride. You have to actually add gold into it to get it to red. So red glasses are always some of the most expensive, next to really deep blue. This is made by Cobalt. So the strand I'm wearing right now is transparent, shiny indigo blue. I mean, it is luscious. And you see it in the sunshine, it is, but that is from Cobalt. That's where the color cobalt blue comes from, is from the actual mineral. When you get light blues, you get copper compounds. For green, it's iron, copper, or chromate compounds. Yellow is red lead, which is lead with antimony. Now you're noticing, that doesn't sound so bueno. A lot of leads, a lot of coppers, a lot of chromate. Hexavalent chrome is a big thing. That's why we have lots of Superfund sites because of hexavalent chrome. I deal with that on a daily basis, getting hexavalent chrome out of materials to be safe for use. So none of these were healthy. Kind of like the pigmenters for scribes. People who did glass and things had to be very, very careful, and you're breathing in a lot of the fumes of these materials as they're coming into glass. Me, as a person who has very bad allergies to some chemicals, I have to be super careful when I'm melting certain types of glasses, and I can't actually use some of them anymore just because of the high sulfur content on some of them. Like brown glasses are my favorite, amber glasses, to make things look like it's amber, but it's not, it's sulfur. So black is a mix of manganese, cobalt, and iron. Basically, if you get a whole bunch of stuff together, it's just going to be black, especially if there's iron involved. White is antimony oxides, again, not pleasant to be around. And then brown is sulfur. And brown, you're like, but there are some really pretty browns. It's not just poo brown, right? There are some really pretty browns and tans and those kinds of things that you do see. But again, if any of these compounds is in the local area or where they're getting the materials from to make the glass, it will actually turn things that color. One of the things that Turkey at the time, the Anatolian region of Turkey, was really famous for was for their blue beads. But they would scrap entire lots of beads because when the beads were cooling, they would sometimes turn green just because of the chemical compounds that were happening, and they didn't get things heated to a specific way to keep the blue color. And they would just sell those off. And a lot of the, if you listen to Ibn Fadlan, which if you've watched The 13th Warrior, everything that Antonio Banderas talks about up to the Viking funeral is actually from the diary of Ibn Fadlan. He's one of the only in-period persons to write about the North people. And he talked about all of these women having these green glass beads, and he was kind of laughing about it. It's because they really weren't valuable anywhere else except for to the North people, because they were being sold the seconds, basically. I wrote an article about it in the Tournaments Illuminated a few years ago, and it's just kind of one of those fun little tidbits of history. But colors, as you can see, the gamut of colors are there. So archaeological evidence, because again, I'm going to swing this back to, here's all the cool fun things you can do, but hey, let's go look at the archaeological evidence. I'm a big research nut. My laurel actually is in research and documentation, so I do like to go digging through all the fun things, right? So finds. And again, we're talking for the North. We're talking for Finland, Sweden, Northern Russia, those places. But again, those were large trade areas. We have jade Buddhas that have been found in Viking North's graves. So you know that came all the way from China. We have coins from the Islamic world all through the Northern world. So things were traded all the time across the Silk Road, up through the rivers, etc., going north. It's not that they were insular, didn't talk to anybody. No, it was trade. It just took a long time to get the materials from one place to another. So we've got Gotland, Sweden, Imberka, Sweden. We actually have York, England, because we did have folks going pillaging and staying in England. Staria de Loja, Russia. Lots and lots of beads found there. Kent in Norfolk, England, and Northumbria, England. Again, more sites that settlements happened. And then in Denmark, Dunkirk, Denmark. Again, there's lots more other places, but from the pictures that I've been showing, these are where these items have come from. So where did the glass and pieces come from? Because again, folks in the North didn't probably have the amount of silica that they needed for sand and doing all these things. How did we get actual manufacture of beads? So we've got Roman Moravian make for anything that you have in the, and I should have edited this slide. We're kind of stopping using the term Anglo-Saxon and moving just to Saxon around 751 AD. It's become kind of a racist term, I'm going to state that. Go look up on that. There's lots of articles talking about it and how the archaeological world is trying to change their nomenclature because of it. So it really is just the Saxon people. But the Franks carried all the Roman traditions through because Rome made lots of glass and they moved it all the way up into the Celtic folks too. We've got amber carnelian coming in from Hebrides, Norway, up into the Vikings. Again, I need to go edit the text here, but amber and carnelian, we still get most of it coming in through Russia nowadays. Again, we found lots of glass, amber and carnelian started Doja, Kiev, Novgorod, Russia for the Rus and the North. In the Middle East and Byzantium, they would make things and ship things north. And we got rubies, sapphires, emeralds from Indonesia through the Arab trade routes. I mean, honestly, everything came through. Birka, where we actually have a bead maker shop, those pieces of glass, they've been able to tell chemically that they came from places in Turkey, which is amazing. You're like, wow, we can tell by looking at the material exactly where this came from. Woohoo, this is cool. We know it got traded. And that would come in as, pieces of glass, like probably maybe this big, maybe a little bit longer, and you're transporting that thousands of miles. Just imagine that, right? I mean, now we have worldwide shipping and you hope things don't get broke, right? But it's amazing. So modern glass versus period glass. Gonna do a chime check. Oh, I'm still doing great. We'll have a lot of show and tell after this then. So I'm a glass bead maker, not as much as my apprentice is. She's gotten really into it and she just bought herself a new torch and has been taking classes and things at our local glass studio. I stopped for a while because when I was pregnant, I lost the heat sense in my hands and most of my body, so I would burn myself, and that's not a good thing of not noticing you're burning yourself. So I've stopped. I've done a little bit here and there, and I'm probably going to get back to it here shortly, but there isn't a ton of difference material-wise, but again, like I talked about, where they got the materials. So modern practice, glass is silica, boric oxides, arsenic trioxide, and phosphorus pentoxide. This is directly from a glass a glass source. Modern glasses, including Pyrex, are borosilicate. They actually have a really high melting temperature. They're actually, that's kind of all the rage now, everyone doing boro glass, and you get cool things like dichromaics and things like that. There's some really neat things you can do with boro. Not at all period, because they just couldn't get things up to those temperatures and working that way. But that doesn't mean you can't go and use boro glass for your beads. It's fine. But again, in period, they would take silica, limestone, because that, and again, this is where some of the impurities would come into, because limestone is just beds and beds of ancient seabeds that have gotten laid on top of each other. So who knows what was in that, right? From the effluvia coming through. So that you would get other compounds coming through that, as well as, maybe if we added this dirt from over here to here, we get this color. Again, they don't know why, but they know that they did this and this and got this, it works. So in the period practice, again, they were mixing all of those things together. What's really amazing is, honestly, the glass furnace technology hasn't changed really at all. It's just how we power those furnaces, from wood burning to now we use gases to do it. That's really the only difference. And we have a lot more temperature control because we've got thermometers and pyrometers that we know exactly the temperature of things within the furnaces to pull glass and those kinds of things. That's really the only difference. There's been a lot of there's been a lot of information coming in from Theophilus. He was a monk in the 12th century who wrote about many and diverse arts. That's his book is on diverse arts. But he talks about glass furnaces and shows very detailed diagrams of their construction, and they really aren't that much different at all. Another book that I have is from the Anatole region of Turkey, and they've got people that have been making glass beads for centuries, like families upon families, and those furnaces look no different than what Theophilus shows from the 12th century. So again, it's just slightly different for how we melt things, not for how we actually do things. We just have more control of glass color, But even then, depending on your gas mix that you have, if you're using an oxypropane torch versus a MAP gas torch, if you have too much oxygen or too little propane or things like that, it will actually color the glasses. There are some glasses that are more prone to color change because of impurities in the gas mix that you're using. So again, even we have problems modernly keeping the colors of glass consistent. So it's kind of food for thought that way. So the next picture is a couple of furnaces that I helped build at Penzic quite a few years ago now. This is from her ladyship, Cynthia. She was out of Caid. She has since unfortunately passed away. Darn cancer. But these are two furnaces that she's built. You do see on the right-hand side here, we are actually using a hand crank bellows versus an actual period style bellows to get the oxygen in there. And that's one of the biggest things for control, is getting enough oxygen into your fuel source to then get the right amount of heat going through. But you can see that here there was actually two openings on this furnace from here and here. These are the rods that they were using to melt the glass on and make the beads. And then right here is a little, basically a kiln. It's right next to the fuel source, so it's going to slowly cool those beads down. If you cool glass too quickly, it cracks, or it has micro cracks within it. So if you would tap it on like a surface or hit it on your mug, it would shatter. So you want the glass to slowly cool down from the 1700 degrees it's at. I do actually have a cool video. I don't know if I can get that to work. Let's see. Pause share. Yeah, I don't know if I can get that to work. But there's a cool video. I do actually put that in a handout, I believe. So you can go look at it. There's a bunch of reenactment. Oh, I need to not pause. Resume share, there we go. But there's a lot of reenactment societies up in Sweden and Denmark that actually do period bead making at their reenactment events. So I've tried to make furnaces the same way that they do. Still working on it, my apprentice and I. We've had a couple of awesomely failed experiments, and that's okay. That's the science. That's the fun. We failed at it. It's okay. We still entered it in arts and sciences. It wasn't perfect. It didn't work, but we learned a lot of things. A lot of it comes down to the airflow. We actually do need a specific type of bellows system, and not to have the air too turbulent coming through. If it's got too much chatter in the airflow, it's like too, it affects how the fuel burns and affects how you can melt your glass. If it's nice and steady and lamellar, as we who are engineers say, it's much easier to do. And there's a fine way to control that. So this is the bibliography for everything I've talked about here. It's also in your handout. There are some links in there that are defunct where I got some of the photographs, and I apologize, but again, the internet is variable. But there is just a lot of good information out there on beads and items. I do list my Tournaments Illuminated article right here. And then this is Theophilus, if you want to get this here from Dover. There's just a lot of cool things about beads, etc. But at this point, I think I'm going to go to stop share. If you can highlight me, Amana, and just to kind of show off some of the beads, and if we've got specific questions. Usually I come through and I like hand around beads to kind of show things off. But I think I'll just show them off here. So you can go to your local bead stores and you can find, cool beads. This is lapis. It's got like gold streaks running through it. Things to be aware of, and one thing you should do a test for when you buy things is a lot of the beads are dyed colors. It might have started off as lapis, it probably is lapis, but they added a colorant to make it a deeper, darker blue. So if you soak it in water a little bit and you rub it around your hand, you'll know if that is dyed, and if it is, be aware where you wear it because it may come off on your clothes. Things to be aware of. I have done that. But also cool is we now have all these cool little metal beads. So there we go. There's a good focus. Lots of cool dots, but you can use those as spacers. I use them as spacers a lot between glass because I don't like my glass beads to rub against each other because, again, glass against glass, I just worry about, because I've put time into making these or I've bought beads from somebody who made these, I don't want them to be damaged. I put things between, but you can get so many different colors. Like here's again a faceted glass bead. It's having a hard time focusing on that because of the color. But you can see the shine, the facets coming on. And then you get pretty things like labradorite. Ooh, shiny, so pretty. Again, this is semi-precious stones I picked up at the gem show here in Tucson. We are luckily enough to have one of the world's largest gem shows that happens here every year that's not COVID, though it is going on right now, which not the best, I don't think, but hey, it happens. But as crown, you get given lots and lots of beads, especially if they find out you're a bead maker. So I've been given tons of beautiful beads over the years, and you can see there's stacked dots, there's raked items. I mean, they're so pretty, and I kind of get them all together and then I make things from them. I tend to also give out beads as gifts. Like if I'm at an arts competition and I see something I like, I put down a bead with my business card. So you can gather little beads of things or treasures from arts and sciences displays if you get a lot of like little tchotchkes. This one's kind of fun because there's a little mousey on it. Let's see. You can kind of see. There's a little mouse with a little tail, which is super fun. So you can hide little fun things. One of the things that here it is. So one of the things you can do is you can make like little loops to attach, like maybe it's a pretty site token you like, those kinds of things. And some of the stuff that I do, I got little hangies off of there. And these hangies are kind of fun because these are my first glass beads I ever made. Like they are lumpy and misshapen and I love them. And that's okay. And then I have a laurel medallion that was made for me to go with this and some eye beads. But these are my first ones to show everybody. They're not perfect. They don't have to be. They're just fun. And it's just little twisted wire, and that's wire from Michael's to put it all together. But you can see just a little strand. And that's a lot of wealth right there if you think about it in period, because the glass was super expensive. And it's little. It's not a big, huge strand, but it's still plenty of wealth. It's not like my Helgi strand I got gifted as a thank you for making something. I mean, this thing is chunk. Huge, huge beads for Master Helgi up in the West. I actually learned how to make eye beads from him, sitting and talking to him from over time. Here's an example of using a Millifluori, two of them together as making a bead because they were thick Millifluori. So that's just two slices of glass that have been melted together to make a bead, which is kind of fun. And then these ones were made by a gal out of Barony Aitenvelt, and she was making them as gifts. And I liked these two because they have little suns on the Millifluori in the middle. But it was just things I put together from various gifts and things. And they don't always have to be big, huge beads. Another cool thing is this is from Master Tariq again. All those little chips you're seeing is coral, and coral was actually found. You find it a lot more in like 14th and 15th century, but we still did find some of it. Now, admittedly, all this coral is dyed, so do be careful. It will dye things red. But again, you can add things together, and so you can show off the little bit of glass beads just by a pop of color. But many, many things you can do. Here's some of my green glass beads I had done with, hey, Turkish coins on things. You can find those from lots of shops for folks who do Middle Eastern dance. You can actually buy them by like 10 or 15 coins, and they make great little additions. Or you can put a site token there. If you've got a favorite site token from an event that you want to commemorate, like you only made it to this event once and it was cool, add it in. It's fun. Because they did the same thing. Like you find like book hinges from from Bibles that were stolen out of Britain that are in North graves, that they're the book hinges that they basically made a fold over and made a amulet. Just, you know, funny, crazy things like that because they thought it was pretty. The book had no use for them, but the bindings were pretty and we liked those and they were metal and we'll go use them. So that's really what I've got. What questions do you guys have for beads, and you know what you should go look for? Do you think you got a pretty good handle on that and we can just chit chat about colors and those kinds of things?
The one question I do have is, what are you using to string the beads?
Aha. So I use modern, let's see. I'm looking for my toolkit. My studio is a little jam-packed and it's become my office since COVID started. I am looking for my, there it is. And I can't actually get to it right now because I got stuff on top of it. But what you can use, you can use Melon is a company that has wire. I prefer wire. And one of the reasons I prefer wire is it doesn't disintegrate. I live in 8 belt. Heat rot and dry rot happens a lot if you use thread or cord. If you live in a damp climate, the same thing can happen. So I use, I was using Melon. That's something you can commercially get available. I actually use a jeweler's wire now, and you have to do a crimp bead at the end to keep everything going. And what I tend to do is I hide the crimp underneath a bead at the end of the necklace.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if that'll go focus. Or I get a big barrel to go on the end. Yeah, like I have these carnelians I always use at the ends of mine because it sits really nice on your neck. And then I hide the ends and that crimp in there. And you can get a crimping tool at Michael's. They're little blue pliers. And you have to crimp once and then twice, and it locks that into place. I like crimp tubes versus crimp beads, but they both work. You just have to be careful that some of the glass, especially if you get handmade glass items and even the things that were commercially made, they might be sharp on the inside. So do pick up a reamer. It's basically a thin piece of metal that has, it looks like sandpaper on it, but it's not. It's actually a metal file, or a small set of round metal files to kind of file off the rough edges, because any rough edges on any of the materials you put on that will start to cut into the metal. Even some of my stuff on the professional grade items I use, and the product is escaping me, and I'm sorry. You guys can email me and I'll send you the links to the professional grade stuff I use. It's a 39 strand metal cord. Really soft flex, that's what it is. It's called soft flex. I pick it up at the gem show at the soft flex booth, or I order it online. It's usually not available in commercial stores, but they do sometimes have it at jewelry supplies as well. Like the one in Albuquerque.
Rio Grande.
Thank you. I'm like, God, I get their catalog. Drink my coffee. But you can get it from Rio Grande, but you can also get it at cost from Soft Flex. It is really spectacular, super flexible. The bead alone stuff is good, but it's not quite as flexible as Soft Flex. But again, what you can afford and what you can use. If you can only afford cord, just really keep track of things. And I find if you keep it a short length, like not much more than this is too long, I would think, because you can easily catch it on something. Keep things at short length, or keep things at a comfortable place. So if you do have a cord breakage, you're gonna actually catch all of your beads. If you're using like silk cord, not in between each bead. That way, if you lose a single bead, you're not losing the whole strand. And then just be aware of children. Children love to pull on things. I didn't wear any of my festoons until my son was about 3.5, 4, just because he liked to pull on things and pull on mommy. And he learned right away, but he's like, it's so pretty because it's shiny. Kids want to touch it. And even as a crown, I have found that kids are still that way, and it's okay. And I've learned I would hold on to things. Like if a kid wants to play with it, I hold on to it so there's no actual pressure. and they can play with it and they can see it, and I've had them nom on my beads, and that's fine. You know, it's, be aware of what you're doing. If you're going to be working in a kitchen, things like that, maybe not wear your festoons or take them off and store them with, you know, somebody who's keeping track of your bag. So it's one of those things of use what you can afford. Cord is just fine. Like I got this one from Scott and Maggie. It's still on the leather cord, the adjustable leather cord. I still wear it. I like it. Eventually this cord's going to die, but I do keep track of it. I do check it. Every time I wear it, I check for any wear. Because on leather cord, you can start to see wear patterns, especially if you wore it in the same spot every time. But I do check it, and I sometimes just put a little bit of jojoba oil on my hand and oil the leather. But again, eventually I'm going to have to string it on something that's not this, or buy more leather cord. Because I do actually like this one. I like it that it's adjustable. And they probably did the same thing in period, right? We don't have examples of what's inside of there. And a lot of times archaeologists aren't smart enough. I'm going to say smart enough because they're not bead makers, they're not jewelry makers. And they don't look for the things that we look for, which is like, what's inside that bead? Do they look at the chemical analysis of what's inside? Like, do we know if there's still clay left over from the release on the rods? Or was it all the rods were pointed, which you sometimes see, but sometimes you still see, because you'll see one part of the whole of the bead is much narrower than the back end. That means that the rod was pointed so that as it cooled, you could basically knock the bead off versus having any release on the rod at all. If not, you have a really pretty hair stick. I've made lots of hair sticks because my bead release wasn't set correctly, or I overworked it and broke it off, etc. But archaeologists don't look for things inside of things. They look at, well, here's what I'm at. And we're like, but we're looking for more information. So I don't know if there's enough residue left over inside to say, was it leather? Was it a bast fiber? Was it silk? They may have had them. Was it just wool thread? You know, we just don't know. And again, a lot of times when the beads are found in graves, they're strung all through the body, if the skeleton's still there. If not, there's so many other layers of things on top of each other that it's sometimes hard to discern what was where, because you're talking, you know, millimeters of fabric thickness and getting through all of those items. And if, depending how the grave was found, if it was found by a farmer in his field, it may have been dug up by a machinery, and then archaeologists have to come in with the evidence and go, okay, what do we think was here? So not everything is always found nicely and perfectly, like you see on all of, you know, the shows. A lot more, it's, you know, Indiana style grave robbing is how it kind of looks for when they start into their processes. But yeah, and the other thing that I do is I make little metal loops, because I like to take my beads on and off. I make a little metal loop. That way I can hook them onto my brooch, or hook them behind my head, or I actually do use modern ring and hook ends, depends on what you like. I sometimes have problems with big hooks behind my head because my hair is very fine and it likes to get caught. So there's just a nice ring and hook. That's a good example. There's a crimp bead you can see, because Tariq did not hide that one. Okay. But there's a little crimp bead right there. I like to hide them because, again, my hair gets caught. And you may find a difference is if you always wear your hair in a kerchief, it's not such an issue, but I like to wear my hair down sometimes. And at the end of the day, I have to have somebody unwrap my hair from my necklaces. It happens.
And got a 5-minute warning for change of class.
Okay, because I have a big changeover for my next class. So do we have any final questions? My email address is on my handout. If there's anything that you guys need or want. Oh, so pearls, yes. Later in period, you see pearls, but most of the pearls that you see aren't beautiful Caribbean, round, gorgeous things. They are goofy looking seed donut style. And most people wouldn't even think that they were a pearl modernly, but they are. They were they're kind of ugly. but you can still use them. Again, sparingly, because pearls are something really that we don't see a lot in northern areas. I mean, some oysters have them, right? But they weren't really as common. And they weren't cultured like we have now. Because now they're kind of fake. They stick a piece of plastic inside the shell, and then it forms the concretion around it to make the pearl. That's for the cultured. When you see a cultured pearl, that's what it means. It means humans were involved with poking stuff into poor animals. But they do, again, in graves, it's harder to find because that's a natural thing and they start to disintegrate. So again, if they find calcium inside the grave, is that from the bones or is that from pearls? So the class handout is there. I do need to get set up for my next class. If you have any questions, please send me an email. Thank you. Hi, I'm Duchess of Atenveld, Barony of Triscothier, which is modernly Tucson, Arizona. My laurel is in documentation and research. Research means lots and lots of books. Modernly, I am an engineer. And when my husband and I, who's also an engineer, graduated from college many, many years ago, we decided that we were going to maintain the purchasing habits of college students buying books every semester. And so we've kept buying books every semester as we've gone through. And now at this point, we've had to stop because we've run out of bookcases. We're at 14 bookcases in the house, about 1,000 books in our research library. And so we're kind of mixing and matching and purging a few things and looking for expanding the house to put a library in. But that's my problem. But what that problem helps you guys with is I went through and talked to a lot of my friends and resources in the SCA and said, hey, if you're a person who's starting out or a person who has been in the SCA a long time but hasn't really gone down the research path, what do you think someone should start off with? What's on their bookshelf or nowadays on your virtual bookshelf? Because a lot of these books are available as Kindle and electronic editions. That where would you start? And, you know, we debated it for like 6-7 months and I came up with the first list. And over those years, because it's been about 10-11 years since I came up with that list, things have changed, new authors have come about, books have gone out of print as they do. But there's still a good list of 10 books or 10 topics of books, as you'll find out, that it would be good to have as a general resources for your own personal library. Or if you have a household, you know, one person could have this book, another person could have this book, and then you all have 10 books, and it kind of spreads the love and the cost. This doesn't mean you have to own these books. This means that these are resources you could go check out from your local libraries or borrow from somebody, as I said. But it's a place to start if you're looking at building a research library, or at least a bibliography of things to go look for. So I do have, you guys have the handout, and did you put the handout in the chat, Mama?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so I'm going to be presenting slides. These are basically, it's going to go through the same information. As we go through the slides, when we get to the other resources, I'm going to talk to those, but they're not going to be on the slides themselves. I just thought that got really lengthy as I was putting the slide deck together. But let me get, oh, no, I did the wrong order. Okay, I need to share my screen first. It's going to be that one. Okay, and now I'm going to do some switcheroo. Come on, laptop. There we go. Okay, now you should see a full size with the title page of my slides. Is that what everyone's seeing? Awesome, thank you. So again, Duchess Yunka, and these are the top 10 books every SCA person should own and other stories, because I could talk books all day long. Okay, we're gonna go over the list. We're going to talk about those. I'm also going to go about how to go find books to buy, how to find books to get for loan, further list of books by subject, and if we've got time, what are your favorite books that you might have that I might not have, and that's okay, because I'm always on the lookout for more books. So the first book on the list, Medieval Tailor's Assistant, Making Garments from 1200 to 1500 by Sca Thursfield. This actually just got a second edition, and I almost bought the second edition when I was prepping for this class because I was like, there's more stuff in it. But this is my copy. It's an old yellow copy. It is quite awesome. It goes through, and I'm going to pause my share for just a second. It goes through, and I'm going to flip through the book so you can see some of this. Like how to make eyelets, like how to actually sew things by hand, how to actually cut things out. I even have my first exemplars of how to do eyelets. It's a little piece of scrap fabric. It's tucked into where the eyelets are at because I can't remember because I don't do them often, but it's tucked into my book so I can find them. It talks about the history behind some of the clothes, including coats, C-O-T-E-S, which is basically the 14th century tunic, but it could be a dress. It could be an undergarment. There are so many cool things. It shows you how to do your measurements. It shows you the patterns and how to lay them out for fitted clothing. Now, even if you don't do 1200 to 1500, it is still a how to take measurements resource, how to look at fabrics and what they're good for resource. So even if you do like I do year 1000 Rus Norse, there's still lots of information in here on seam finishing and how to do construction that is still important and still really, really good to have. So it's one of those things of, it's just a great resource. It's really easy to follow. Even if you've never sewn before, it is such a great way to do it. And it even has hats. Hats are amazing because without accessories, you're just in a tea tunic, honestly, right? For a lot of our time period, it's just a tunic until you accessorize and put the hat, the belt, the shoes to make the full outfit. And it goes through all of that in this book of how to make those objects. So again, awesome resource for all sewing levels. I love it. I may get the second edition and then, sell this edition because they've expanded it and I want to go see what they've expanded it to. But that just shows this book has been on my list for 10 years and they've now put out a second edition. And that's the second edition that you're seeing on the picture in the slides. I need to resume share. There we go. It is just a great book and lots of fun. And again, it took me a while to go buy this book because I'm like, well, I don't do that time period. I was kicking myself for not bought it earlier when I started sewing. Because I'm classic for, it takes me 100 times of doing the same thing to get it right. And this would have helped me out a lot of how to do fit for clothing. So that is book number 1. Okay, so the second book is On Diverse Arts, the foremost medieval treatise on painting, glassmaking, and metalwork by Theophilus. This is actually a period resource, primary source right here. This Theophilus was a 12th century monk. This is a translation, but he basically shows you the basics from period of how they did metalworking, glass, painting techniques, soldering, all sorts of things. If you're interested, did they do that in period? Here is a 12th century source that put all of that information together. The nice thing is it's cheap. It's still in print. It's 10 to 15 bucks. Sometimes you'll find it in a used bookstore for cheaper, but it goes through so many things. Like, let's see, how to do repoussé work. Now it's all in words, most of it. There are some diagrams, but he goes through and shows you how to make a chalice. Now that might not be something you actually want to go make, but you can go see what they did in period and what tools they used and how they put it all together. That might give you ideas of how to make something else that's not maybe quite as complicated. One of those things as we go researching in are aspects of the SCA about how do they do these things in period. This is the one-stop shop book because it tells you exactly how they did it. Now, caveat, some of these things are very dangerous to do. Some of these involve chemicals you should never be getting anywhere near of, like lead and those kinds of things. So take things with a safety precaution of, does this sound safe? But you can always do this is how they did it in period, and here's how I do it modernly, because I don't want to get lead poisoning, or I don't want to deal with this nasty chemical. But it gives us a view into the medieval world. Some of the pictures are absolutely amazing coming through. He talks about, like, there's the second book is all about the art of the worker in glass. So there's multiple books inside this one, talks about how to make, how gold and silver are applied in books. He talks to you about how you gild illuminated manuscripts. It's just amazing. How to make tin leaf. So that's got a lot of lead in it, FYI. How to make varnish. I mean, all of these things, all in one handy dandy $10 book. So that is book number 2. Any questions thus far?
Nope.
Okay. Book 3. Now, there are many resources for calligraphy. This is the one that I tell everyone to go get. Medieval Calligraphy, Its History and Technique by Mark Drogan. $10 to $20. It's a Dover imprint, which means it's inexpensive. They reprint this all of the time. The reason I say to get this one versus a just how to do calligraphy book is the first half of this book is all the history, talking about letters and how they came to be and how the different styles of calligraphy happened. It's the history portion that's really entertaining. A lot of folks who use this book on a daily basis as a scribe don't look at the first half. It is actually really informative and really awesome because he shows all of the different ways the text for like a specific style went through transitions, or depending on which scribe was actually writing it, how it changed and looked slightly different. That's really important because as you start looking at medieval illuminated manuscripts and look at medieval writing, you can tell different scribes from one another. You can tell different ways that things happened or how things changed with writing, just how we modernly, everyone writes a little bit different, even though we're using all the same alphabet, at least in the Americas and the English speaking world, right? But it's amazing. And then you go into the second half of the book, which is the how-to. And his Duchess, which is basically the step-by-step of how to do writing, is very clear. He puts it on a graph paper grid, which is exceptionally helpful for people who are learning how to write. Because again, this isn't learning a new art style, it's learning how to write all over again. And if you remember from when you were little, learning how to write in kindergarten, it took some time, it took some practice. Your teachers walked you through step by step how to form each letter. Well, he does that for, I think, over a dozen different scripts. So it's really fantastic. And then he even talks about each of these individual ones and then shows you some of the period exemplars right next to you on the other page. So yes, there are other books on calligraphy. Yes, I own a ton of them. There's a couple, like the Calligraphy Bible is a really good one. It comes in a spiral binding, so it flops open. It's really good for an exemplar. I just love this book because one, it's really inexpensive and it has all of that history as well as the technique inside. And it's lots of fun. And this is like the third copy I've owned. I actually need to get it spiral bound at my Kinko's, which is something that they will do for you. If you have any paperback books that you want used, they will spiral bind them for you for a fee. It's usually pretty inexpensive too, especially if it's a book you use all the time. Like cookbooks, also same thing. But this is book number 3. Ta-da. Okay. So book number 4, is not just a single book, it is a topic of books. A book on heraldry. There's a lot out there. There is not a single text that's going to tell you how we do it in the SCA, but there are texts that will help you understand what the heralds are talking about. And if you have an interest in heraldry, what you can do to learn the nomenclature, because it is a completely different language to speak herald. There's colors are completely different. There's positions of animals, there's positions of things. It's, you know, it runs the gamut. It is a completely different language to understand, and there's so much history behind it. And then there's also history behind how the SCA does it. And we actually have tons of resources on sca.org in the heraldry section. You can go read about our rules and those kinds of things. There is so much information out there. But if you want a primer on what is what, there's a couple different books. Now, the first book I give you is A Complete Guide to Heraldry. You can get it from 10 to 15 bucks. It's Fox Davies. Again, this used to be, it's kind of the Bible. It's like the big book of heraldry. And it's good. It is out of print most of the time, but you can usually find it in used bookstores, those kinds of things. You'll find it used online. So the price isn't usually very expensive for a out of print book. Here is my copy. It is big, chunky. It's a chunk book. But it goes through and talks about, like, there's an entire chapter on all the insects you would see in period on heraldry. It talks about the crests on helmets in achievements. There are some good pictures as we kind of go through. It talks about, shows you pictures of examples. It says with 779 illustrations and 8 full color plates. So there's a lot of good information here. Again, it's pretty dense. But it's got a lot of good info, and for a cheap book with a lot of info, I think it's good. If you can't find it, I did recently come across one called An Introduction to Heraldry for $5. There's a Kindle edition of it too, so if you wanted a $5 book to put on your electronic reader, it's actually not too bad. Called An Introduction to Heraldry. This is this book here. It is very basic. It talks about the colors. It talks about charges. It was written for a very specific organization, but it goes through all of the basics. It shows you, what you can do with certain things. But again, like here's, if you can see the different shield shapes that go in with things. But again, for $5, a good basic book, cool, right? You can hand it off to somebody and say, hey, and the cool thing is at the very, very back, they have templates for drawing your shield, which I thought was pretty fun. So you can put that on tracing paper and go make your own, right? But again, it doesn't go through how to blazon something very well, but it does show you all the locations for objects that they can go. And again, for $5, it's quick and dirty if you want to know a little bit more about heraldry. But again, our heralds have a lot of good information up on our sca.org site to go to their area. But if you want a book on it, I suggest one of these two. Okay. We're halfway through the top 10 list. Again, this isn't just a book. It's a book on medieval cooking. So, caveat, medieval cookbooks are like getting a recipe from your grandmother, which is take a little bit of this, take a little bit of that, put it all together and bake it long enough. Not kidding. So you will find medieval cookbooks in two varieties. One is basically a direct translation or a direct full text with stuff just like that. And then you'll get cookbooks that show you the original, and then they show you what we call redaction, meaning someone's gone through and done the work for you of how much ingredients are needed for each of the components that go into the dish and how to cook it. So it's kind of like somebody translated grandma's recipe into something you could make. You don't have to be a cook to own a medieval cookbook. I think it's just fun to read them because there's so many neat things that you have. The first book I have on the list, which is because of things being in print, is called Plain Delight. Yes, it's written in Old English, the title is, but it's a wonderful yellow book. I wonder why most of our medieval books come in yellow, because they're shiny and they'll look good on the shelf, I bet. But basically, it goes through and shows you the medieval recipe in Old English, a lot of these, and then it shows you a redaction of how to go cook it completely. Like there's lots of information on that one recipe that was only like four lines long. And they're really good. And it goes through various styles of what you could want to cook, from side dishes to soups, pottages, main dishes, desserts, those kinds of things. And subtleties, because subtleties are those things that look like they're not the thing. There are lots of fun during feasts, if we all remember those. But Plain Delight's a good one. You can find it all the time. It's a little expensive. It's like $31.45 right now on Amazon that I can find. But again, I find this book a lot in used bookstores, or check, yard sales, those kinds of things. The one book that I think is lots of fun, and this is written by an actual SCA person, is Cindy Renfrew's Take 1,000 Eggs or More. And yes, that's actually a recipe because you're cooking for a lot of people. But it is not as available as Plain Delight. But if you can find it, it's between $30 to $40. It's actually 2 books. The version I have is spiral bound for cooking easy. And I've got it tabbed for various recipes. But again, it's a similar concept where the medieval recipe is at the top and the redaction is below. There's just so many more recipes, and it's written by a mistress, Singerfu Werfest. I probably butchered that. I apologize if anybody knows her. But it goes through and it is really well researched and really well documented. And it even says in the back, documentation has never been this easy from the tournaments illuminated. So if you're looking for a period recipe on something you want to bring to a medieval potluck or enter a competition, either one of these books would help you with that. And it might just pique your curiosity of, well, can I make an appetizer for this thing? Again, it's a lot of fun. You can find these. Again, since I started teaching this class, a lot of our medieval bookstores have gone to the wayside. We used to have quite a few more, especially at Penzic, but a lot of those folks have retired and not passed on their businesses, but you can still find things and we'll talk about it. The other one that I found when I was digging through my cookbook was also from an SCA folk. This is Caradoc's Miscellany. Also very well researched, but again, finding this one's difficult. And there's a lot more in here than just recipes. But again, you might find those from somebody who's cleaning out SCA bookshelves, etc. But you want a medieval cookbook just for giggles a lot of times, or to make something tasty. Okay, book 6. A book on arms and armor. Whether you're a fighter or not, it's always helpful to know what each individual pieces are called, like helm, gorget, sabaton, cuisse. These are all terms that represent different pieces of armor. And if you hear these words, you're like, I have no idea what that means. But fighters speak fighter and armorers speak armor. And a lot of these books show some of the most beautiful pieces of armor from history. Now, the first book that I state is Arms and Armor of the Medieval Knight. It's been out of print for a while, but you can find them online from $3 to $100. I've seen this book given out as attorney prize multiple times. So I still think it is the quintessential book on the subject. It's just hard to find. You might have even seen this book It has a bright red cover. It's got a wonderful guy on horseback. It has a unicorn tapestry guy on the back. But it goes through and shows you, I mean, the Sutton Hoo helmet is like the first page. It goes through and shows you the history. It shows you weapons. It shows horse accoutrements. It is just an amazing book with lots of good information. But if you can't find that, recently, there's also, this is the third book here I'm going to show you, but the Medieval Arms and Armor, a Pictorial Archive from Dover's also really good. I couldn't find my copy. I may have given that one away, or my son has stolen it because he likes to go raid the picture books of the bookshelf. He's 10 and that's cool. But this is the latest book that just came out from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, all on European armor. If you do late period fancy, this is really a beautiful book. It's about $25 right now. They do actually have it on Kindle version. Look at all of the different styles of gauntlets they're showing. I mean, this is a pretty picture book. There is, if you look at any of the beautiful engraved and etched armor, I mean, it's super pretty. So if you know somebody who's into armor or into late period items, I mean, look at that. It is just eye candy. And it also talks about the history and what those pieces are called and how to read. What I think is funny is the book's called How to Read a European Armor, and that's just the last chapter. I thought that was kind of fun. But it's a cool book. It's got lots of cool information in it, especially if you do late period armor or know somebody who would be interested in late period armor. It's a really cool coffee table book as well. And it's inspirational, right? You can go look at some of the really fancy stuff and go, okay, well, that's what the kings and princes were wearing. What were the commoners wearing and what pieces were really important? Just some really cool picture style books to go through the history and just know what those pieces are. So if somebody has something fall off of them on the field, you can say, sir, your cuisse fell off. And they know what they're talking about. So it's good to have a basic book on arms and armor. Okay, heading on to book 7. So this is like the Medieval Tailor's Assistant. Even if you do $11.50 to $14.15, Dress Accessories is a book everyone should own. Now, the Museum of London books are expensive. This is one of a series. They range from $30 to $40, depending if you get hardcover or softcover. They are well worth the investment. They are from finds in London, specifically at the Museum of London. Sorry, talking, must drink. As you can see, my book is well tabulated. I have lots of sticky tabs in there looking for various things from various research points I've come through. It shows you the finds for belts, any type of accessory you can think of, jewelry, etc. It shows you a picture of the find. It shows you side views. It shows you the back of things. And then it discusses what the materials were that were used within them and a lot of times how these things were made. The cover of this edition shows you a bead maker. If you just took my last class, this is a guy making beads, whether it's from amber, from bone, from jet, etc. It's showing you, they're showing you examples of that and just goes through. It shows you belt mounts to make your belt look fancy. There are lots of SCA merchants that sell pewter mounts that you can put onto your own belt that shows you all the different styles, and most of those manufacturers in the SCA actually got them from period sources like this book. It is just amazing. You want a belt buckle, you want, I mean, look at these belt buckles. These are just like things I could buy at Tandy Leather. So you can make it look just like your book. It's just amazing. And they even show you how to decorate things called squiggle work, where you take a sharp point and make it squiggly. I tend to use a sharpened screwdriver to do this, but it works. They made little squiggles, and you can see that on the side of the belt plates there. I mean, it's just an amazing book. Even if you don't do this style, it goes through, because a lot of those techniques for making things didn't really change. Metalwork is metalwork. And as we got towards more modern things, usually it's the, how did we heat the metal? How do we do this? But a lot of the hand techniques are exactly the same. And a lot of times making it by hand versus using power tools, one, much safer. And two, allows you to get a result that looks very period. So this is a wonderful book. It's wonderful just to read through and see all the different things that we find, especially in London. So much stuff was found in refuse piles and in the dragging the Thames. People just lost stuff, hairpins, belt buckles, everything. You know, just like now, you lose your wallet, we don't lose shoes as often, but our mud's not as thick, right? We have modern streets, so we don't lose our shoes in the mud unless you're at Estrella, right? So that is book 7, Dress Accessories. Again, any of the Museum of London books are good, but this is the one I recommend for everybody. They've got one on knives and scabbards and on shoes and on household goods, but they are all excellent books to put on your Christmas wish list. if people are looking for things to buy you. But this book is number 7. Book 8, one of my personal favorites. This is the Mastermeyer find by Greta Arvidsson, and I have a misspelling there. It's not Greta Berg, it's Gusta Berg. This book is $15. It is the best $15 you will spend if you make things. Because did they have this tool in period? This book will tell you. Because this is a Viking age tool chest that was found in Gotland, Sweden, fully intact. Like, the farmer's been using this field for generations, and he dug this up out of his field plowing once year. A full intact tool chest. Completely. Like, the guy had buried it to come back to it later and never did. Full intact. It's super thin. You're like, $15 for a super thin book? Oh, but wait. It talks about the grave find. And then it shows you close up gorgeous pictures of the toolbox and the items, some of the items that were in it, just splaying out right here. In this picture, you can see a bearded axe, a sax, which is a type of knife. You can see a key for a lock. You see chains for a cook pot. You see snips and pliers, multiple different heads of hammers, and a nailing head, which is how you make nails. That's just one picture. Making nails hasn't changed other than the tools we use. Blacksmiths to this day still make nails the same way. Has not changed. It talks a lot about the grave and how we found the information about it, but the back half is the best. It is all of the pretty black and white photographs of everything in the box, including a cooking grate to hang over your campfire, bells. Got to put some bells on your cows or your kids. All the different styles of hammers. Blacksmiths have a lot of hammers. If you've ever watched Forged in Fire, you see all the different hammers they use. Those have not changed. Snips and pliers, files, rasps for doing edge work and finish work, those haven't changed. The shape's changed a little bit, but look at the cross hatching. This is all in this book. It's just amazing. I mean, I love this book so much. It's like my favorite book ever. And then it also gives you the cross sections of the hammers so you can see the different shapes they go through, and the bench dogs for inside of a workbench that holds things down for woodworking. My husband uses them all the time on his woodworking bench. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. A metal bucket to go over your fire. I mean, it's absolutely just the best book. And a hammer is a hammer is a hammer. You all saw that. You could recognize that as a hammer. You can recognize the spoon bits that go into drilling holes. Those haven't really changed much if you use an auger bit on a brace, which is a hand tool versus using a power tool. A lot of the folks that do hand tool woodworking and metalworking, their shops look exactly like what you see in here. So you can say that, hey, we've had these tools for like well over 1,200 years. So we know that this is the type of tools that were used in period. It's just amazing, like absolutely amazing book. $15, really neat to look through and see. And every time I look through, I find something new. Okay. We are in book 9, a general book on medieval history. So the SCA basically, I'm gonna put basically, it used to be, we stated it was from the fall of the Roman Empire until the beginning of the Renaissance. Now we basically say anything pre-17th century. That's a lot of time. And if you want to look at just the medieval portion of the time versus ancient time, because if we say pre-17th century, that could mean anything in recorded history, right? Before that point. But general history, you should have a general book on what was going on in the medieval world. I got 3 examples. You can find these for various things. Some of them have a bit more, information and some pictures, but this is the Oxford book. It's a little meaty, but again, go through, read it once, get some idea of what's going on, because different things were happening in different points of the world. This is the Penguin history, very similar information. The new Penguin Atlas of Medieval History is lots of fun because I love this one, and it comes in and out of print, but it shows you who owned what pictorially. So here's Europe and the Mediterranean, and it goes through and shows you who owns what through like 1,000 years of history, which is pretty darn cool because, Poland kept getting run over by everybody. Like throughout history, the area of location where we now have Poland just kept getting run over. Like it's crazy. I just love it. And it's like, here's 1173. You can see the German Empire in the middle and everybody else around it. It's just a really neat pictorial atlas and just a lot of fun. And then here you get to 1400 and you've got the Golden Hordes have all of the Middle East. It's like history changed a lot after 1250 when the hordes came through. But it's just a lot of fun, and having a general book on history will give you more respect for other cultures and what's going on. Because a lot of things like Poland, I hadn't realized how overrun it had become between all the different places. So look for a general history book. You can usually find those at used bookstores really easily. The ones here are also available as you go through. So the next book is our 10th book. And honestly, every person in the SCA should own this book. This is the first book I ever owned for my medieval research. I got it as part of a group buy. This is the Known World Handbook. Now the picture, there is a previous edition. Right now we're on the 4th edition, I think. So here's the cover of the 4th edition. But this is the SCA Handbook. It's a little out of date right now because, again, it was published in 2011 was the last edition, but it has so much good information for name a topic. There's stuff in here like a checklist for camping. You're going to your first camping event. Here's a checklist. How many people will be looking for that? Heck, I go back to that. Costuming. Here's some beginner's tips for costuming. There's also really fun little comics in the corners that make you giggle because they're usually really bad puns. I love puns. But again, there is so much good information on here about personas, general information, how to go, what to do at a feast, like you've never attended one, or if you have attended one, what are things you could do to keep yourself occupied while you're waiting for the next course? There's games, what to do for kids, arts and sciences. This class is actually in this edition. It's older, so it's got some of the books that we've talked about, some of them that we haven't, because they've gone completely out of print. But I do think everyone in the SCA should own this book. It's $15. I remember when I first started out, I was in high school, and $15 was a lot of money to me. But I kept that book. I still have that edition, thumbed through, tabbed, everything, and it still has great information. And even all of the editions, even though some of the information might be out of date for what the kingdoms are, a lot of this hasn't changed. Courtly graces, things to do when you get called up in court. All of that information is in here, and it's great for newcomers. And I almost wish that when you got your membership, they sent you a copy. But it's such a great book. Let's see. Okay, we're getting close to time here because my moderator has to go open up a completely different room for her next classes that she's hosting. So, how to find books to buy. Again, you don't have to buy the books. Amazon. Yes, there are overloads, but the prices can be high. Do check around. Alibris is all about used books and good at finding things, rare books. Aid Books, also a good selection, reasonable prices. For new books and things that are coming into press, Oxbow Books and David Brown Booksellers, who they are, be careful there. Bookfinder is also another awesome website that can help you find things throughout, lots of various sellers, etc. And then used bookstores, local bookstores, yard sales, and thrift shops. A lot of books actually come to bookstores and used places. People just can't transport books anymore. People have gone all digital. Those things happen. Sometimes people in the SCA need to purge or move, and they're like, hey, I'm getting rid of these books. Here you go. Go see what folks have. How to find books to get on loan. Please support your local library systems. You pay taxes to keep them there. Your librarians have to have, at a minimum, a master's degree to be a librarian. They would love to help you actually find a book versus, kicking kids off the internet for, surfing or playing games when they should be using the computers there for good resources or shelving books. Please let them do their job to help you find the information you need. There's also a system called Interlibrary Loan, meaning you can get a book for a certain amount of time loaned to you for a very minimal cost. Usually it's just postage. Now, again, if you're doing research and you need a book, they can help you find it. The other cool thing is the Worldcat Database, and this is all in your handout with all the links and all of that. The Worldcat Database is actually all of the library systems. So you can tell your librarian, hey, this book is in this library. Can you find out if we can get that loan to us? Because not always do we have library loans from each location, but they can maybe call up and find out what they can do. And archive.org, it's an internet archive called the Wayback Machine. There's also a lot of books that are out of print or have lost their copyright that are out there as well, or places to find, internet research things. So there's just a lot of information on books there as well. So further list of books by subject. I did put a list together. There's various topics there for you to go peruse and look at your own course if there's areas of study that you're interested in. I do have a lot of resources in there on Middle Eastern information because there's so much out there, people don't even realize what's out there. But please go read through that on your handout. Lots of information there, lots of good places to look for information. And then I think we'll take a couple of minutes to discuss if there's any questions or what your favorite book is. Do we have any questions?
No questions in the chat.
Oh my goodness, really? No questions? I gave you all the information you could possibly want.
Always being evil and showing things in the chat, like what's available digitally. Your Davies book for Heraldry is actually is free for Kindle or $2.99 according if you have Prime.
Yep, there's a lot. Again, I didn't put which ones were Kindle available just because not everybody is on the Amazon master thing, but there are places to buy a lot of these as ebooks if you're so inclined. I still love hard copy. My son, when he was in daycare, he was about 6 or 7 months old, and they called us one day because he was doing something weird, and he was sitting with the box of like paper book or little kid fabric books, and he was picking them up, looking at them, and putting them in piles. And we had to explain that my husband and I were in the middle of a research project, and we had pulled things off the bookshelves and put them in piles and would flip through them and put them in keep or put them back on the shelf piles. And he was doing exactly what we were doing. It wasn't weird. It's just normal for our house. I did put a link in the handout to my library thing. It's actually a digital record of my library. So if there's a book you're looking for and it's actually in my library and there's like an article you need, things like that, I can send you photocopies for information, or we can talk about maybe a loan, possibly, if you're in my local area. There's some books that we have that we don't let out of the library, but you can come see them once we're open from COVID restrictions, things like that. But it's one of those resources, and library thing is actually pretty cool. There's a lot of folks in the SCA that actually do have their libraries on there. It's a great way for cloud resource, and it helps my husband and I prevent doing $400 mistakes again, because we've bought some of the same books a couple of times.
Yep. Here's my $400 book. Let me see if it'll come on. Come on. It's not.
No, it's being weird.
Yeah, hold on. I'll get rid of the virtual background. That helps. Okay, maybe. There it goes. Come on.
Cool.
It's not going to do it.
It's okay.
But it's The Study of Archaic Braiding Techniques in Japan by Masako Kinoshita.
Ooh, nice.
I got it one time on Interlibrary Loan, and it was on house arrest here. So I had to physically visit it at the local library for the 3 weeks they had it.
Oh, sometimes that happens, and that's okay. The thing with books, again, is, treat them right, use the research. I use sticky tabs and things a lot, or pieces of paper. I will find notes as I go through things. My older copy of the Untitled Handbook is very marked up and very aged, and you can tell I took it with me all over while in college, etc. But again, there are so many good books. So many good ways to get things. And I know you have to get ready for your next class.
Yes, I have to switch rooms.
Okay. Thank you guys all so much. And again,
Thank you very much.
My email address is there, and please contact me there. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. There's the link. Unfortunately, I've got to